Erased Destiny. Chapter 12. Actor or Traitor. Jargon was the first to get up. He couldn't fall asleep in the new place for a long time, while nightmares plagued him at night. Still tired after the journey, he went for a solitary walk along the coast. Golden rays lit up the sky, showing the low-hanging sun, which further saddened the boy. He wondered, was Marigold already up? What had she been up to? Was she thinking about him? He laughed bitterly. Marigold had new friends, a new life. She didn't need Jargon. He passed two boys, kicking a ball between them. He was surprised that they were up at such an early hour, but he immediately encountered more families heading toward the sea. He shook his head doubtfully, but found no reason why it was worth giving up a few hours of sleep. He retreated into the thorny bushes. He had never been fond of the company of people, and, after separating with Marigold, he exceptionally had no desire to see how others enjoy their lives. He walked along a path where he didn't expect to find anyone. Bushes obscured the sea, insects buzzed unbearably, and, in addition, there was an unpleasant smell of unknown origin in the air. It seemed to Jargon that it was the bushes that reeked of rotten fruit, but he saw nothing but leaves, twigs, and thorns on them. The sand creaked under his feet, but the boy did not take off his shoes. The path ended, rather unexpectedly, a landslide cliff. On the other side, it continued to run, so Jargon created an ice footbridge connecting the two sides of the precipice. He was sure that in the inaccessible part of the beach due to the downpour, no one would disturb him. He walked along the sea, paying no attention to the passing bushes until a thorny branch tore his sleeve. He continued walking, but this time being careful which way he went. Jargon was pleased to hear the sound of the sea becoming clearer. The road gently descended toward the beach, and the place of inaccessible bushes was taken by sizable flowers. They looked like they had been planted by human hand, so beautifully arranged in imaginary beds. After a few minutes of walking, Jargon reached a small bay, fenced off by a stone wall on one side and a sandy spit on the other. The water lazily mussed the narrow beach, surrounded by greenery on all sides except one. The boy sat on the sand and gazed at the water. He was captivated by its color, slightly greener than in other areas of the coast. He pulled a rolled-up paper and a coal from his pocket. He stared at the sea for a while and set about sketching. However, the drawing did not depict the beauty of nature or a white-winged bird jumping on the sand. It was a wooden pier facing the sea, and next to it a guest house for guests who appreciate peace and quiet. Preoccupied with pondering the design of the facilities submerged in the water, Jargon did not notice that it was past breakfast time. He returned to the apartment sometime after 12 o'clock.
"Where have you been? You could have at least left a note."
"I thought I'd be back before you guys woke up. I was walking on the beach and lost track of time."
"Surely you don't have the strength to accompany me to the port."
"Why? I don't feel tired. The healer told me to walk as much as possible, so I will gladly go with you, Dad."
Any excuse was good to get the angry mother out of sight. Jargon was sure they would stop by some eatery on the way. He didn't like fish, but his hunger was so bad that he was willing to eat anything non-poisonous.
"I guess you are interested in an early dinner. Something quick or—"
"The sooner the better. I'm dying of hunger."
They went down to a woman who was selling stuffed meat pies, freshly baked, still warm, perfect for eating. The men made their way along the cobblestone promenade directly to the harbor, where boat builders were constructing huge wooden structures. Cyril walked ahead, not looking around, and Jargon tried to keep up with him, at the same time looking at all the wonders around him and devouring meat pies.
"Cyril, How are you? Did you arrive yesterday?
Morton, we haven't seen each other in a long time.
They shook hands, and Cyril handed the man a flask pulled from the inside pocket of his loose black shirt. Before they engaged in conversation, Morton uncorked the bottle and inhaled the scent coming from inside. Jargon took the opportunity to look at the scaffolding supporting the ship's skeleton, so he did not listen to the conversation.
A fine beverage. You can always be counted on.
I still don't know why, of all the drinks, you insisted on such a bitter one. It's impossible to drink it.
At least I feel alive. Did you come with your wife or to relax?
In response, Cyril reached for the presented flask and took 2 sips. They moved along the wharf, further away from the houses and workshops, farther away from the workers and the steady hammering of hammers.
Free yourself for one evening. There is a job.
Today.
It can be today. And this youngster is yours?
Instead of answering, Cyril reached for the flask again. Before the men knew it, they saw the jagged rocks marking the end of the beaches, emptied half a bottle and lost sight of Jargon. And they reminisced about previous hunting expeditions to nearby caves.
We will dive on the other side of the bay. I have prepared a boat.
Will it pay off?
Otherwise I wouldn't bother you.
Cyril sat on the sand and Morton sat next to him. They stared at the sea, calm at this time, silvery in the sunlight. They had known each other since childhood, so long that a few words were enough for them to agree on a plan of action. Morton's rusty beard had already seen its first gray hairs, and his head had long glowed bald. But even a sizable belly didn't prevent the man from living the pirate life. He settled on the coast to keep an eye out for opportunities to get rich quick, ships sunk by stormy waves. During the day, he worked in the shipyard. At night, he sat in the tavern listening to gossip and sailors' stories. He checked every piece of information he heard, sailing a small boat through the treacherous waters offshore. He was most interested in contraband goods, but to sell them, he needed the help of his best friend from the streets of Teardom. They stopped the conversation about looting the wreck, as Jargon, tired from a long walk on the beach, reached them. Suddenly, Cyril had an idea how to get rid of at least one of the people who could thwart the knight's plans.
Jargon is interested in shipbuilding. Could he hang around you guys?
Sure thing. I'll give him a saw. Let him practice. The chief constructor is coming in 3 days. Maybe he will find a moment for him.
I am the Sintra's architect's apprentice. I already have some idea of building houses, but ships under construction is something that I see for the first time in my life.
Being architect is a good job. If I was smarter, I would have become a constructor. But I am not, so I watch over the workers.
Relieved of the need to carry on a conversation, Cyril wondered how to explain to Joanna his planned evening disappearance. He didn't feel like waiting for his wife to fall asleep, which sometimes took an annoyingly long time. Fortunately, he took sleeping herbs with him. Jargon stayed at the shipyard, and Cyril returned to the apartment. The sight of his elegantly dressed wife surprised him a bit, but less than the hat with a huge brim that Joanna held in her hand. Not only was the faded purple not the color black, the only acceptable color in their home. The dry flowers tucked behind the ribbon did not suit Joanna at all.
I met Belinda and she invited us for afternoon tea. Shall we go?
Cyril laid down on a deck chair standing on the terrace. Belinda's afternoon tea parties had not once lasted until lunch, so he rejoiced at the favorable fortune. He rubbed his forehead with his hand, reached for a cup of water and sighed heavily.
I don't feel well. I think I will stay at home. Jargon is in the port, looking at the ships.
Although I'm glad he's finally spending time outside and not lying on his bed from morning to evening, I'd rather he stay away from the port. Nothing good will happen to him there.
With her hat still unlaced on her head, Joanna walked down the steps to the boardwalk connecting their bungalow with the beach a little lower down. Cyril listened to the distant rustling of the stiff dress, and when the sound of the sea completely drowned out his wife's footsteps, he got up from his deck chair. He threw a couple of eggs into the frying pan, added sliced sausage, and, satisfied with the absence of fellow diners, sat down at the table.